Laura had always lived a quiet and simple life. Her days started early, with the sound of birds outside her small apartment window and the smell of coffee filling the air. She worked as an assistant in a local shop, nothing fancy, but it helped her manage her bills and keep her mind busy. Life had taught her not to expect too much, yet she never complained. She found joy in the little things, a friendly smile from a customer, a cool breeze on her walk home, or the sound of rain against the glass. It was on one of those ordinary afternoons that everything changed. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Laura was walking home after a long shift, her bag slung over her shoulder, her mind lost in thoughts of what to cook for dinner. The streets were busy with people heading home and traffic filled the air with noise. She stopped by a crossing, waiting for the light to turn green. That's when she noticed something strange on the other side of the road. A little boy, and no more than 6 years old, was standing far too close to the edge of the sidewalk. He seemed alone, holding a small toy car in his hand, looking down at it, completely unaware of the danger just inches away. Cars were rushing past, horns blaring, drivers impatient. Laura's heart began to race. She looked around, expecting to see a parent or guardian nearby, but there was no one. The boy took a tiny step forward, and Laura's breath caught in her throat. Before she could even think, the boy dropped his toy car, and in a second of innocence, he bent down to pick it up, stepping right into the street. Time seemed to slow. Laura's instincts took over. She threw her bag aside and sprinted forward, shouting, "Stop!" Her voice got lost in the noise. The boy didn't hear her. A car came speeding toward him, the driver slamming the brakes, tires screeching loudly. Laura lunged, wrapping her arms around the boy and pulling him backward with all her strength. They both fell hard onto the sidewalk as the car stopped just inches away. For a moment, everything went silent. People gasped, some running over, others frozen in shock. The little boy began to cry softly, clutching his toy car to his chest. Laura's hands were shaking, her heart pounding so fast she could barely breathe. She hugged the boy tightly, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now. You're okay." Then, through the crowd, a woman's voice cried out in panic, "My son, oh my God, my son." A young mother came running, tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees beside them, holding her child close. "What happened? Are you hurt?" she asked him again and again. The boy pointed at Laura and said through sobs, "She saved me." The woman looked at Laura, realization washing over her. Her voice trembled. You saved him? I don't know how to thank you." She hugged Laura tightly, still crying, her voice breaking with gratitude. Laura just shook her head, still in shock herself. "He's fine," she said quietly. "That's all that matters." The mother nodded, holding her son as if she'd never let him go. People gathered around, asking questions, comforting the child, praising Laura for her quick thinking. But she didn't feel like a hero. She was just relieved that the boy was alive. A man from the crowd picked up Laura's bag and handed it back to her. "That was brave," he said with a small smile. "You could have been hit too." Laura tried to smile, but her hand still trembled. "Anyone would have done it," she murmured, though deep down she wasn't sure if that was true. The mother thanked her again and again, tears still glistening in her eyes. "You saved my whole world today," she said softly. "I'll never forget this," Laura smiled faintly. "Just take care of him," she said. The crowd slowly began to scatter. The boy and his mother stood together, the mother whispering something to him. He waved shyly at Laura before they disappeared into the busy crowd. Laura stood there for a while, staring at the spot where they had been. Her knees felt weak. The adrenaline that had fueled her moments ago faded, leaving behind a quiet ache in her chest. She sat on a nearby bench, trying to steady her breath. For the rest of that evening, she couldn't stop replaying the moment in her mind, the screeching tires, the look of fear on the boy's face, the relief when he was safe. It felt unreal. That night, as she sat in her small kitchen with a cup of tea, she thought about how quickly life could change, how 1 second could separate tragedy from relief. She looked out the window at the dark, quiet street and whispered to herself, "I hope he's okay." Days passed, then weeks. Life went back to normal, or at least it tried to. Laura returned to work, chatted with her coworkers, and followed her simple routines. But something in her had changed. She found herself more aware of people around her, watching children crossing the road, helping elderly neighbors with groceries, offering kind words to strangers. Sometimes she wondered what would have happened if she hadn't been there that day. The thought made her heart tighten. She didn't tell many people about it. She didn't want attention or praise. It was just something she had to do, the right thing at the right time. Months later, while walking through the same street where the accident nearly happened, Laura stopped for a moment. She stood at that corner watching cars pass by and felt a chill run through her. The memory was still vivid, the noise, the fear, the small hand she had pulled to safety. She took a deep breath and smiled faintly. Maybe that's why I was there, she thought. Maybe I was meant to be. As the years went by, that day became a quiet part of her story, something she rarely spoke of but never forgot. She grew older, moved to a smaller home, and continued her modest life. Every now and then, she would remember the boy's face, those wide, frightened eyes, and the way he clung to his toy car. She often wondered if he remembered her too. There were nights when she sat alone with her thoughts, feeling the weight of time and the loneliness that often came with it. She had no children of her own, no close family nearby, but thinking of that moment always brought her comfort. It reminded her that her life, though simple, had mattered. One afternoon, she was sitting by her window when she saw a little boy walking with his mother on the opposite sidewalk. They were laughing about something, holding hands. Laura smiled softly. For a second, she saw a reflection of that day years ago, the same innocence, the same fragility of life. She whispered under her breath, "Be safe, little one." What she didn't know was that somewhere in another part of the city, that boy she once saved had grown into a young man. The memory of that day never left him. He carried it like a hidden promise and a moment that shaped who he became. For Laura, that afternoon near the busy road would always remain a turning point. The day she proved to herself that courage doesn't need recognition, and kindness doesn't ask for reward. She had no idea that life was quietly preparing something unexpected, that the same boy whose life she saved would one day walk back into hers, carrying a surprise that would change everything all over again. But for now, she sat in peace, unaware of the future, sipping her tea by the window. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the same colors as that unforgettable evening. A soft orange glow that reminded her that even in the rush of ordinary days, miracles could happen in the blink of an eye. And in her heart, she carried one simple truth: sometimes, a single act of kindness can echo for years, finding its way back to you when you least expect it. Years passed, but that one moment on the busy street never truly left Laura's mind. It was like a photograph printed deep inside her heart. A little boy, a toy car, a rush of fear, and the sound of screeching tires. She didn't know his name or where he lived, yet she often wondered what kind of person he might have become. Life moved forward quietly. Laura still lived in the same small apartment with the same cracked walls and faded curtains. Every morning she brewed her coffee, tied her hair back, and walked to the little shop where she worked. Her co-workers often called her steady as a clock, because she never missed a day and always came on time. She wasn't someone who talked a lot, but she was kind to everyone. When customers came in tired or upset, she greeted them with a smile that seemed to calm them. "Thank you, dear," people often said, and she'd simply nod. Inside, she sometimes felt lonely, but she had learned to fill her life with small, quiet joys: her garden of potted plants on the balcony, her old radio that played soft music at night, and the stray cat that sometimes visited her doorstep. Yet, every once in a while, her mind would drift back to that boy. She would remember the feel of his small hand in hers and how his mother had cried in relief. Sometimes she even dreamed about that moment, not as a nightmare, but as a reminder of how fragile life could be. There were days when she'd walk by that same intersection on her way home, pausing for a moment to watch people cross. Children holding their parents' hands always made her smile. She would wonder if the boy she saved was somewhere out there, living a happy life, maybe studying, maybe growing into someone kind. But in reality, she had no way to know. The years blurred together. Work, bills, and the quiet rhythm of daily life kept her busy. There were moments of struggle, too. Her health wasn't always strong. Sometimes she woke up with pain in her back or found it hard to stand for too long. The little shop didn't pay much and prices kept rising. But she managed, the way she always had, with patience and faith. One winter, things became especially difficult. The shop owner had to cut hours because sales were slow. Laura found herself sitting at home with too much time and too little income. The silence in her apartment grew heavier. The radio seemed quieter, the nights longer. She started knitting scarves to sell at the local market, just to keep herself occupied. Still, whenever she felt tired or hopeless, she reminded herself of that one moment long ago. "You did something that mattered," she would whisper. "You saved a life." It wasn't pride that filled her. It was peace. The thought gave her a strange kind of strength, like a small light inside her that never went out. One rainy evening, as she was closing her windows against the wind, she noticed a young mother across the street struggling with her toddler and groceries. Without thinking, Laura ran over with her umbrella and helped carry the bags to their door. The woman thanked her again and again, and Laura just smiled, brushing rain from her hair. When she returned home, she realized she still had the same instinct she had all those years ago. The need to help, even in small ways. Time kept moving. The little boy she once saved would have been a grown man by now, maybe with a family of his own. She liked to imagine him living somewhere safe and happy. One evening, while cleaning out an old drawer, Laura found a small newspaper clipping she had kept for years. It was from the day after the rescue, a short article about a mystery woman who saved a child from an accident and disappeared before the family could thank her properly. She had never told anyone it was her. The paper was yellowed and torn at the edges, but she still kept it folded neatly inside a book. She read it again, smiling faintly. "I guess I was that mystery woman," she whispered to herself. Then she closed the drawer and went back to her quiet evening. Seasons changed. The town grew busier, new buildings appeared, and familiar faces moved away. But Laura stayed in the same place. Her world was small, but it was enough for her. Sometimes she thought about moving closer to her cousin in another city, but something in her heart told her to stay. She didn't know why, but it felt like she still had a reason to be there. A chapter of her life that hadn't been written yet. One autumn afternoon, as golden leaves covered the sidewalks, Laura sat on a park bench feeding pigeons. An old man sitting beside her started a friendly conversation. They talked about simple things, the weather, the city, and how fast time seemed to fly. "Do you ever wonder if the good things we do come back to us someday?" he asked her suddenly. She thought for a moment. "Maybe not in the same way," she replied softly, "but kindness always finds its way back somehow." The man smiled. "That's a lovely thought." That night her words echoed in her mind. She didn't know why, but a quiet feeling stirred inside her, as if life was preparing something. Winter arrived again. The air turned sharp and cold, and Laura spent most of her evenings indoors, knitting and watching the world through her frosted window. Sometimes she received Christmas cards from old co-workers, sometimes not. Life was peaceful but lonely. Then one morning, as she checked her mail, she found a letter that looked different from the usual bills and flyers. It was a plain white envelope with her name written neatly on the front. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Curious, she opened it slowly. Inside was a short note written in careful, steady handwriting. "I've been searching for you for a very long time. You may not remember me, but years ago you saved my life. Please be home next Thursday afternoon. I owe you more than I can ever say." There was no name, no phone number, no return address. Just that message. Laura stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. She read the words again and again as if trying to make sense of them. "Saved my life." Could it be? After all these years? She sat down at her small table, holding the letter tightly. A flood of memories came rushing back. The boy's frightened eyes, the screech of tires, the mother's trembling voice. "It can't be," she whispered, but her heart told her otherwise. For days she couldn't stop thinking about it. Who could have sent it? What could they want? Was it really the boy she saved? Or was it some kind of mistake? She almost thought of ignoring it. But something deep inside urged her not to. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was hope. When Thursday came, she woke up early. She cleaned the house, made tea, and sat near the window, waiting. Hours passed. The street outside was quiet except for the occasional car passing by. Just as she began to think no one would come, she heard the sound of an engine outside. A sleek black car stopped in front of her small home. A man stepped out, tall, confident, dressed neatly in a dark coat. He looked too young to be a businessman, but too mature to be a student. Laura's heart raced. The man looked around, then smiled as if he already knew her. He walked up to her door and knocked gently. She opened it slowly, unsure of what to say. "Hello?" the man said kindly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. My name is Daniel." He paused for a second, his eyes soft. "I don't know if you remember me, but many years ago you saved a little boy near a busy road. That boy was me." For a long moment, Laura couldn't speak. She simply stared, seeing flashes of the past. The frightened child, the toy car, the mother's tears. And now here he was, standing at her door as a grown man, her lips trembled. You're that boy?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I've been trying to find you for years." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she felt her heart beat fast with something she couldn't explain. Disbelief, joy, and a sense that life was finally completing a circle she didn't know was still open. She didn't know it yet. But his visit would bring more than just memories. It would bring a surprise so big it would change everything she thought she knew about fate and kindness. Laura stood frozen at her doorway, unable to believe what she was seeing. The man in front of her had kind eyes and a calm smile, yet something about him felt familiar, like a memory she had been carrying for years. He looked confident but humble, the kind of person who had been through struggles and learned from them. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The world outside seemed to slow down. The faint sound of a passing car, a bird landing on a nearby tree, the soft rustle of the wind. Finally, the man spoke again, his voice gentle but steady. "You probably don't remember much about that day," he said, "but I've never forgotten it. You saved my life when I was just a boy. My mother told me that story so many times I could almost see it happen, even though I was too young to remember clearly." Laura blinked a few times, trying to find her words. I can't believe this," she whispered. "You were just a little boy. You've grown so much," he smiled. "That was many years ago. I've been searching for you for a long time. My mother always wanted to thank you properly, but we lost track of you after we moved." She stepped aside and said softly, "Please, come in." He walked in, looking around the small, cozy home. It was simple but warm. An old sofa with a handmade blanket, framed pictures of flowers on the wall, and the faint smell of tea and cinnamon in the air. He smiled faintly, noticing how peaceful it felt. Laura offered him a seat and poured tea into 2 mismatched cups. "I still can't believe you remembered," she said, sitting across from him. "It was such a long time ago." He nodded slowly. "Some things you never forget," he said. "You might not realize it, but what you did changed the entire course of my life." She looked at him, puzzled. "Changed your life?" "Yes," he said quietly. "That moment, your bravery, your kindness, and it stayed with me. I grew up knowing that a stranger once risked her own life for mine. It made me want to live in a way that honored that second chance." Laura listened, her eyes softening. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just acted. Anyone would have." He shook his head gently. "No, not everyone would have. You didn't think twice. You didn't even know me. That kind of courage, it leaves a mark." There was silence for a few moments. Laura sipped her tea slowly, still trying to take it all in. "How did you even find me after all these years?" she finally asked. He smiled. "It took a while. I only knew it happened in this town, near that intersection by the bakery. My mother had mentioned it so many times that I started searching records and asking around. Most people didn't remember, but an older man at a small cafe recalled hearing about a woman who worked nearby. He didn't know your name, but he described you. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me looking." Laura's eyes widened slightly. "You went through all that trouble just to find me?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because I owed you everything. I built my life because of what you did." He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small, worn-out toy car, the same one he had dropped on the road that day. "I've kept this all these years," he said with a faint smile. "It's a reminder of that moment and of you." Laura's breath caught in her throat. Seeing the little toy made the memory rush back with full force. "You still have that?" she whispered. He nodded. "My mother picked it up after that day. She gave it to me years later and told me, 'This toy should remind you that you were given another chance. Use it well.' I've carried it ever since." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Your mother must have been a wonderful woman," she said softly. "She was," he said, his voice growing quiet. "She passed away a few years ago. Before she died, she told me one last time, 'Find the woman who saved you. Tell her thank you from me. So here I am. Laura placed her hand over her mouth, trying to hold back her emotions. Oh, I'm so sorry, she said. She was such a kind person, I remember her face that day. He smiled sadly. She always said you were our miracle. For a long while, they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. The ticking clock filled the room with a steady rhythm, and sunlight filtered through the thin curtains. Then, after a deep breath, the man said, I didn't just come to thank you. I wanted to do something for you, something that might repay a small part of what you did for me. Laura shook her head immediately. You don't owe me anything, she said. I didn't help you expecting anything in return. He smiled kindly. I know, that's exactly why I want to. You taught me something that day. That real kindness doesn't ask for reward, but still I want to show my gratitude. She frowned slightly, curious. What do you mean? He leaned forward. You've lived here for a long time, haven't you? She nodded. More than 20 years. I know this might sound strange, he continued, but I've seen this house before. It's old and I noticed it's been needing repairs. I actually bought it last month. Laura blinked, confused. You bought this house? He nodded, smiling gently. Yes, from your landlord. I wanted to make sure you never have to worry about rent again. It's yours now, completely. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What are you saying? I'm saying it's your home, he replied simply. I've already taken care of everything. The documents are ready, all in your name. Laura stood up, her hands trembling slightly. No, you can't do that. That's too much. I can't accept something like that. He stood up too, looking at her with calm sincerity. You gave me my life, Laura. What could ever be too much compared to that? Tears welled up in her eyes. She shook her head, still in shock. I never did it to be repaid. I just wanted you safe, I know, he said softly, and that's what makes it mean so much more. Please let me do this. It's not just about money. It's about keeping a promise, and to my mother and to myself. I wanted to make sure you'd never struggle again, at least not alone. Laura sat down slowly, covering her face with her hands. She had lived a life full of small hardships, unpaid bills, old walls that needed fixing, sleepless nights worrying about the future. The idea that someone had thought of her this way after all these years was almost too much to process. I don't know what to say, she whispered finally. He smiled warmly. You don't need to say anything. Just know that I'm grateful, and that I never forgot you. Laura looked at him with tearful eyes, her voice trembling. You've grown into such a kind man. Your mother would be proud. He nodded quietly. I hope so. I've tried to live by the lesson she taught me. That kindness never goes unnoticed. And I learned that from you first. They talked for hours that afternoon. He told her about his journey, how he built a small business that grew over the years, how he struggled at first, and how his mother's story about the woman who saved him gave him strength whenever he felt like giving up. Laura listened, amazed and moved. She couldn't believe that her small act of courage had reached so far. When the sun began to set, he stood up to leave. I'll come by again tomorrow, he said gently. There's something else I want to show you. She smiled faintly, still emotional but calmer now. You don't have to, he interrupted kindly. I want to. As he stepped outside, she walked him to the door. For a moment, they stood quietly. The orange light of evening fell on his face, and Laura realized just how much time had passed, yet how fate had somehow brought them together again. Before leaving, he turned and said softly, You once pulled me out of danger without a second thought. Now it's my turn to give something back. I'll see you tomorrow. When the car drove away, Laura stood by the window for a long time, watching the fading taillights disappear into the street. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. As night fell, she sat quietly on her sofa, the letter still on the table beside her, and whispered, Maybe kindness really does come back around. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but for the first time in years she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of another unexpected chapter in her life, one that would soon reveal an even greater surprise. That night, Laura barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the young man's face, his calm smile, and the toy car he had kept all those years. She kept thinking about his words, how he had searched for her, how he had said she changed his life. It all felt like something out of a dream. one of those rare moments when life gives something back after years of quiet struggle. The next morning, sunlight poured through her curtains. She got up early, tidied the small living room, and made tea even though she wasn't sure if he'd really come back. Part of her wondered if she had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was too good to be true, but deep down she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: excitement. Around noon, she heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. Her heart began to race. She opened the door before he could even knock. He stood there again, smiling, holding a small box in his hands. "Good morning," he said warmly. "I hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," she replied, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Come in, please." He stepped inside, placing the box gently on the table. "Before I show you what's inside," he said, "I want to tell you something." Laura sat down, her eyes curious but cautious. "When I was younger," he began, "I didn't really understand what it meant to be given a second chance. I just knew that a stranger had saved me from something terrible. But as I grew older, I realized that not everyone gets moments like that. Moments that remind you how fragile life is and how powerful kindness can be. That day changed how I saw the world." Laura listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. He continued, "I studied hard. I worked through every challenge I faced with the thought that I had to make my life worth that gift. My mother used to tell me, 'You live not just for yourself, but for the kindness that saved you.' Those words became a part of me." His voice softened. "When she passed away, I promised her I'd find you no matter how long it took. I wanted her to see you again, but even though she's gone, I believe she's seeing this moment now." Laura's eyes glistened. She took a deep breath and said, "Your mother must have been so proud of you. You kept your promise to her. That means more than you know." He smiled gently. "She taught me to keep my word. And now it's my turn to keep another one." He opened the box slowly. Inside was a neatly folded envelope and a set of shiny keys. Laura frowned slightly, confused. "What is this?" He took the envelope and handed it to her. "These are the official papers. This house is now yours legally. You don't have to pay rent, worry about repairs, or think about moving again. It's completely yours forever." Her hands trembled as she held the envelope. "I told you yesterday you didn't need to do this." "I know," he said gently, "but I wanted to. This isn't just a gift. It's gratitude. It's my way of saying that your courage didn't just save a life, and it shaped one." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't even know what to say." He smiled kindly. "You've already said it years ago when you told my mother, 'He's fine, that's all that matters.' That's all the thanks I ever needed. But I still wanted to do something to honor you." Laura sat there quietly for a long moment, looking at the keys in her hand. Her life had always been filled with modesty and struggle, yet she had never expected anything in return for the good she did. Now here was this man, once a frightened child in her arms, standing in front of her, giving her something she could barely believe was real. "You've done more than enough already," she whispered. He shook his head softly. "This is only part of it," he said. "I have one more surprise for you." She looked at him in confusion. "Another surprise?" He nodded and stood up. "Would you come with me for a short drive? It's not far. I promise you'll understand when we get there." She hesitated. "I'm not sure." He smiled reassuringly. "Please trust me. You trusted your instincts that day when you ran into the road. Trust them again now." Something about his tone, calm, gentle, full of respect, made her nod. "All right," she said quietly. He opened the door for her and they stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The drive was peaceful. The road wound through the town and out toward the edge where fields stretched wide and the air smelled of fresh grass. Laura looked out the window, her thoughts spinning. After a short while, the car slowed and turned onto a small path leading to a quiet piece of land. In the distance, she could see a small building still under construction. Workers moved about, painting, planting, and arranging benches. "What is this place?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Come see." He helped her out of the car and led her closer. The closer they got, the more she realized how calm and peaceful the place felt. There were trees planted neatly around the edges, a garden in the center, and a gentle stone pathway leading to a small sign near the entrance. As they approached, Laura stopped in her tracks. The sign had her name written on it. Beneath it, the words read, "The Hope Center, dedicated to the woman whose kindness saved a life." For a moment, Laura couldn't breathe. She looked at him, her eyes wide, tears gathering again. What is this? He smiled softly. It's a community center. For children. For families, for anyone who needs help or support. We'll offer free tutoring, meals, and a safe space for those who have nowhere else to go. I wanted to name it after you, because you were the one who taught me what real compassion looks like. She covered her mouth with her hand, overcome with emotion. You did all this and for me? For what you stood for, he said gently. For what you gave me. I wanted this place to carry your name so others could find hope here. Just like I found hope because of you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Yes, you do, he replied firmly. You've lived your whole life helping others quietly without expecting anything in return. Now it's time the world sees the kind of difference one person can make. Laura stood there, watching the children playing nearby, the workers smiling, the garden blooming under the afternoon sun. She could hardly believe that this peaceful place full of laughter and light was created because of one moment she had never thought much about, the moment she had followed her heart. She turned to him and said softly, You've become such a good man. Your mother must be so proud wherever she is. He smiled, looking at the sign. She used to say that gratitude is best shown through action, not words. This is my way of saying thank you, not just to you, but to her, too. They stood side by side for a while, neither speaking, both lost in their own thoughts. The breeze moved gently through the trees. Laura felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the heaviness in her heart lift. After a long silence, she said, You know, I used to think that day was just a small thing, something I did because I had to. But now I realize it was bigger than that. It changed both our lives, he nodded. It did. Sometimes a small act can start something much larger than we ever imagine. They walked slowly through the garden, and children nearby waved at them. One little girl ran up holding a flower and handed it to Laura. This is for you, the girl said shyly. Laura smiled, her eyes still wet. Thank you, sweetheart. As they left the place later that evening, Laura turned one last time to look at the sign with her name on it. She felt a deep peace settle inside her, a feeling she hadn't known in years. When they arrived back home, she looked at him and said quietly, You've given me something I never thought I'd have again, a reason to feel proud of my life. He smiled. You've always had that reason. I just helped you see it. As he drove away, Laura stood at her doorway watching the sky fade into shades of pink and gold. She touched the small flower in her hand and whispered, Thank you. That night, for the first time in many years, she fell asleep with a smile, knowing that the kindness she once gave to the world had found its way back to her in the most beautiful way. And deep in her heart, she realized something even more powerful, that the good we do, no matter how small, never truly disappears. It lives on, waiting for the right moment to return. Weeks passed after that unforgettable day at the new community center. Life seemed to take on a new color for Laura. The quiet loneliness that had lived in her heart for years was slowly replaced with warmth. Each morning she would wake up, make tea, and smile as she looked out the window. The house that once felt empty now felt alive with meaning. Every few days the young man would visit her. Sometimes he came with flowers, sometimes with groceries, and sometimes just for a chat. They would sit together on the porch watching the sunset while talking about life. He shared stories about his childhood, his mother's lessons, his studies, and how he built his small company from scratch. Laura often listened with pride. She couldn't believe that the little boy she had once pulled from the road had grown into such a strong, kind-hearted man. There was something comforting about having him around, a feeling that life had come full circle. One evening, as the sky glowed orange and gold, he arrived with a few children from the community center. They were carrying drawings and handmade cards. We wanted to surprise you, one of the kids said. Grinning, Laura looked at the colorful cards, her eyes softening as she read messages like, Thank you for helping us and you are our hero. Her voice trembled as she said, I didn't do all this. He did, but the young man shook his head gently. No, he said. This place wouldn't exist if you hadn't saved me that day. You started everything. The children gathered around her, asking her to tell the story of what happened years ago. At first she hesitated. She had never liked attention. But when she looked into their eager faces, she realized that sharing the story could teach them something. So she smiled and began. It was many years ago, she said softly. A small boy ran into the road and I didn't think. I just moved. I wasn't brave, I was scared, but I couldn't stand still. I didn't want something bad to happen. That's all. The children listened quietly, their eyes wide. When she finished, one of the girls asked, "Weren't you afraid?" Laura smiled faintly. I was. But sometimes being kind is more important than being safe. When you do what's right, you find strength you didn't know you had. Her words seemed to stay with the children. They hugged her before leaving, their laughter echoing through the evening air. After they left, Laura looked at the young man beside her. "They remind me of you," she said with a gentle laugh. He smiled. "I see myself in them too, full of questions, but also full of hope." As weeks turned into months, the community center began to thrive. More children came for lessons. Families visited for help, and volunteers joined to make the place better. Laura visited often, sitting by the garden or reading stories to the children. She became like a grandmother figure to everyone there. People called her Miss Laura with affection and respect. One afternoon, the young man called her to the center again. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said. When she arrived, he led her into a small hall inside the building. On the wall hung a framed photograph. It was an old picture of her taken from a newspaper years ago after the rescue. Below it, a plaque read, "In honor of Laura, the woman who chose kindness over fear." She stood silently staring at it, her eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. He smiled. "I know. But people need to know that real heroes aren't the ones in movies or books. They're the ones who care when no one else does." Her voice broke slightly. "I only did what anyone should have done." He nodded. "And that's exactly why it means so much." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of life around them. Laughter from the garden, the sound of pages turning in the library, footsteps echoing down the hallway. It was peaceful, almost sacred. That evening, they sat together outside watching the sunset again. The sky was soft pink and the sound of crickets filled the air. "You know," she said quietly, "I spent many years wondering if my life made any difference. I used to think I was just ordinary, but today I feel like maybe it all meant something after all." "It did," he said firmly. "You saved one life, and that life touched hundreds more. That's how kindness works, and it keeps spreading." Laura smiled, her eyes glistening. "I'm glad I lived long enough to see it." Time went on, and the bond between them grew deeper, not of family by blood, but by heart. He often told people, "She's the reason I am who I am," and she would always reply, "He's the proof that kindness never goes to waste." As the years gently passed, Laura grew older, her steps slower, her hair silver, but her spirit remained bright. She still visited the center, though now she preferred sitting under the big tree where children often gathered around her. She told them simple stories about hope, courage, and doing the right thing even when it's hard. One day she felt weaker than usual. She stayed home and rested. The young man came to check on her, bringing soup and fresh flowers. She smiled when she saw him. "You never forget to bring flowers," she said. He sat beside her, holding her hand. "You taught me to never forget the people who made my life beautiful." She chuckled softly. "You always know what to say." They sat in silence for a while, just watching the evening light fade through the window. Then she looked at him with a faint smile. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything," he replied. "Promise me that you'll keep the center running. Promise me you'll keep helping those children. I want it to keep growing even when I'm not here." He nodded, his voice low. "I promise." She squeezed his hand gently. "Good, that's all I want." That was the last long conversation they had. A few weeks later, one quiet morning, Laura peacefully passed away in her sleep. The news spread quickly through the town, and people gathered to pay their respects. The community center was filled with flowers, candles, and the sound of quiet tears. The young man stood before her picture, feeling both grief and gratitude. She had been more than a savior to him. She had been a guiding light. When he spoke at her memorial, his voice trembled but stayed steady.